My name is Lara. My life at 45 was a testament to what hard work and independence could achieve. Over $10,000 a month wasn't just a number, it was my declaration of success in a high-stakes game. Back when I was knee-deep in the MLM hustle, making a name and some solid cash for myself, Tom came into the picture. He was all charm and smarts, totally taken with the way I managed my business with a kind of independence that seemed to draw him in like a moth to a flame. He started showing up more, offering to help out with business stuff, or just to grab a coffee. I wasn't looking for anything serious, mind you. I liked my freedom, liked making my own rules and breaking them if I felt like it. But Tom, he had a way about him, a persistence that wasn't pushy but kind of endearing. "You're not like most folks I meet in this gig," I told him once, over coffee. "Most guys run for the hills when they hear network marketing." Tom chuckled, taking a sip of his coffee. "Maybe I like the view from the hills. Gives me a chance to see who's climbing up to meet me." It was this blend of humor and sincerity that drew me to him. Our meetings became more frequent, and Tom's interest in my world grew. He asked questions, real ones that made me explain my business in ways I hadn't even considered. It was refreshing, invigorating, and, dare I say, flirtatious. We'd sit and chat about everything under the sun, and it wasn't long before he started talking about his mom. Now, I've always been close to my own folks, so hearing him speak so respectfully about his mother caught my attention. It wasn't just talk, you could tell he meant every word, held her in high regard. And that, I could respect. "Yeah, my mom's the real deal," he'd say with a kind of pride that lit up his face. "She's been through a lot, you know? Raised me all on her own. She's my rock." Hearing that stirred something in me. I've seen my own parents stick out the tough times, their love and respect for each other a constant through it all. I guess that's what got me seeing Tom in a new light. So, when he asked me to marry him, it wasn't the grand gesture or the promise of a life of ease that got me to say yes. It was the simple, honest love he had for his family. I thought, anyone who holds his family in such high regard, who talks about his mom with that much admiration, he's got to be a good man at heart. We got hitched, and those first few months were something out of a dream. Laughs, late-night talks about where we wanted our little empire to go, weekend getaways, just because we could. I was happy, genuinely happy, thinking I'd found someone who got me, who respected my hustle and had my back. After the initial bliss of our unconventional meeting and the whirlwind romance that followed, settling into married life with Tom brought its own set of challenges. One thing that started to stick out was Tom's relationship with his mother, Carol. It wasn't just close, it was suffocatingly tight. They were on the phone multiple times a day, and our weekends were monopolized by visits to her place. It started to gnaw at me, the extent of his attachment and the expectations it placed on us, especially me. One Saturday morning, as we were gearing up for yet another weekend at Carol's, I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. "Tom, do we have to spend every weekend doing chores at your mom's? I mean, doesn't she have anyone else to help out?" Tom looked at me like I'd just suggested we moon the neighbors. "Lara, she's old, and it's just us. Who else is gonna do it?" I sighed, frustration bubbling. "But, it's every weekend. Don't you think it's a bit much? I've got stuff I'd like to do too, you know?" His brow furrowed, and he crossed his arms, a clear sign he was digging in. "Look, Lara, she's my mom. She's always been there for me, and now it's my turn. I thought you'd understand that." The conversation was going nowhere, a stalemate between his unwavering loyalty to his mother and my growing resentment towards the situation. It was a red flag, flapping furiously in the wind of our relationship, but I chose to ignore it, convincing myself it was just a phase. As weeks turned into months, the red flags multiplied. Tom's sarcasm about my work began to surface more frequently. It was subtle at first, almost playful, but there was an undercurrent of disdain that I couldn't overlook. One evening, after a long day of video calls and client follow-ups, I settled next to Tom on the couch, laptop still warm from use. "Phew, nailed another big client today." This could be a game changer for us, I said, trying to share my excitement. Tom, eyes glued to the TV, grunted in response. Oh, yeah, that's great. But don't you think it's time you considered a real job? You know, one that doesn't have you glued to that screen all day? I bristled, my enthusiasm cooling into annoyance. A real job? Tom, this is a real job. I'm making more than we'd ever dreamed of. What's not real about that? He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. I dunno, Lara. It's just, all this network marketing stuff seems a bit dodgy, doesn't it? The word stung, a slap to everything I'd worked so hard to achieve. Dodgy? You know what, Tom? Maybe you should spend a day in my shoes, before you start judging. The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered, a thick fog between us that didn't dissipate. Tom's inability to value my career, coupled with his abnormal attachment to his mother, left me feeling isolated in my own marriage. The red flags were no longer just flapping in the wind, they were blaring sirens, warning me of the storm ahead. Yet, I pressed on, hoping for a change, clinging to the memories of our early days. But as time passed, it became increasingly clear that Tom's loyalty was split in a way that left little room for us, for me. The endless weekends at Carol's, my mother-in-law's place, had turned from a mild inconvenience into a full-blown chore. Every visit was the same routine: sit at the dining table, nod along to Carol's lectures on housekeeping and the importance of saving every penny, and watch Tom hang on to every word she said as gospel. It was like stepping back in time, and I was wearing thin. One such afternoon, as Carol went on about the virtues of homemade meals over eating out, Tom chimed in, his voice laced with that now familiar sarcasm. Yeah, Lara, maybe you should take a page out of Mom's book. All that time on your computer, and what do you have to show for it? A strange business that no one understands. I felt my cheeks burn, a mix of anger and embarrassment. Tom, we've been over this. My strange business is paying our bills, and then some. I'm working, not playing around on the internet. He scoffed, shooting a look at Carol, who wore a smug expression. A real job doesn't have you stuck at home all day. It's about getting out there, dealing with real people, not just numbers on a screen. The jab stung, more so because it was made in front of Carol, who nodded in agreement as if she had any say in our finances. I bit back the retort on the tip of my tongue, realizing it was futile. Tom was echoing his mother's outdated views, and there was no winning against a united front. Feeling isolated and misunderstood, I decided to seek refuge with my parents. They were old school in their own way, but they understood the value of hard work, regardless of the form it took. Their reaction to Tom's criticisms was a mix of anger and disappointment. Lara, it's clear he's jealous, my dad said, his brow furrowed in concern. Envious because you're succeeding without having to trudge to some office every day. Don't let his insecurities drag you down. My mom nodded, her hand squeezing mine. You're doing amazing, sweetheart. Tom needs to see that. He's supposed to support you, not tear you down. Their words were a balm to my frayed nerves, and with a renewed sense of resolve, I returned home, hoping to clear the air with Tom. But what awaited me was far from the reconciliation I'd hoped for. Tom was livid, pacing the living room like a caged animal. So, you ran to your parents to complain about me? About us? He accused, not even bothering to greet me. I was taken aback by the intensity of his anger. Tom, I needed some perspective. They're my parents. Who else am I supposed to talk to? His laugh was harsh, void of any humor. Perspective? Or you wanted them to take your side, tell you how wrong I am? They're poisoning you against me, Lara. That's not true, and you know it, I countered, my own anger rising. They're worried about us, about how we're not communicating. It's not about taking sides. But Tom wouldn't hear it. No, it's always about sides with you. Your business, your money, your parents. What about me, Lara? When do I get to be a part of this marriage? Eventually, the tension cooled, and we found our way back to a fragile truce, but the cracks remained, widening with every sarcastic comment, every dismissive gesture. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles in your stomach like a bad meal, as we sat around Carol's, my mother-in-law's, cluttered dining table. As usual, Tom and Carol were in their element, a duo of traditional views and thinly veiled jabs at my expense. Today's topic of choice, once again, geared towards the proper roles in marriage, a well Carol seemed to draw from endlessly. "You know, Laura," Tom started, his voice laced with that familiar patronizing tone. "Mom's right. There's more to being a wife than just making money. Maybe it's time you started focusing on what really matters." I clenched my fists under the table, my patience wearing thin. "And what, according to you, really matters? Cleaning? Cooking? Being at your beck and call?" Carol jumped in, her voice sharp. "Exactly. It's about making a home, caring for your husband. Not glued to a screen all day. I know plenty of women who'd be more than happy to take your place, ones who understand the value of a proper marriage." The audacity of her words struck a nerve. "Oh, is that so?" I shot back, my voice rising despite my attempts to keep calm. "You think you can just replace me with some step-forward wife who fits your outdated idea of a proper marriage?" Tom's allegiance was clear as he nodded along with his mother's cruel suggestion. "Laura, you're missing the point. It's not about replacing you. It's about what's best for us, for our family." "Best for us? Or best for you and your mother?" I countered, feeling the weight of their united front. Since when did our marriage become a three-person decision? The humiliation of being openly discussed as replaceable, as if I were nothing more than a poor fit in their perfect world, was a new low. Feeling cornered and outnumbered, I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You know what? If you're so convinced you can find someone better, then maybe you should," I spat out, the hurt evident in my voice. Tom looked taken aback, as if he hadn't expected his words and his mother's to cut so deep. But the damage was done, the line drawn in the sand. "I thought marriage was about partnership, support, and love. Not constant criticism and unrealistic expectations," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. There was a heavy silence, one that spoke volumes about the state of our relationship. As I walked out of the room, the sound of my footsteps echoed, a resolute declaration that I wouldn't be belittled or demeaned any longer. After the last blow-up, I was done. Done with the weekend cleanups at Carol's, done with the moralizing, just done. Tom tried to guilt-trip me about it, calling me selfish, saying I didn't care about family. But I wasn't having any of it this time. I had reached my limit. Then came the day that broke the camel's back. I noticed our joint account was bleeding money, a lot of it. Money we'd been scrimping and saving for a new car, our dream car. My heart raced as I logged into our online banking, only to see a massive transaction that nearly wiped us out. I confronted Tom the moment he walked through the door. "Where's the money, Tom?" "The car fund, it's practically gone." He couldn't look me in the eye. I had to use it for something important." "Important? What could possibly be more important than what we've been saving for?" I was fuming, barely containing my anger. "It was for Mom's trip, her dream cruise to Europe." He mumbled it out like a confession. I was stunned into silence for a moment. "You used our savings? For a cruise? Without even asking me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tom finally faced me, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "I thought you'd understand. It's her dream." "Her dream? What about our dreams, Tom? What about our plans?" I was shouting now, my voice echoing off the walls. He had no answer, just stood there looking pathetic. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called Carol, hoping, maybe foolishly, that she'd see reason. "Carol, this has to stop. Tom used our savings for your trip. This is a mistake. You need to cancel it. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her laughter over the phone was like acid. Cancel? Why would I do that? It's a gift from my son. And as for the money, dear, I'm sure you can earn it back. The contempt in her voice was palpable. You're not even going to consider it? After everything, this is how little you think of me? I was grasping at straws, but I had to try. Listen, darling, I'm not refusing a trip of a lifetime. And if you're not happy, well, Tom's already prepared for that too. Check the desk drawer, she said, her voice cold. I hung up and went straight to the desk, my hands trembling. There, among bills and old receipts, were the divorce papers, signed and ready to go, as if Tom had been planning this all along. My heart wasn't just broken, it was pulverized. I signed them, my hands steady, but my soul in turmoil. Packing my bags felt like I was erasing a part of my life, a part one once cherished. As I zipped up the last of my luggage, Tom finally spoke up. His words were a cold dagger. I saw how you talked to my mother. No respect. You don't deserve to be in this house. You don't deserve me. His words hit me like a slap. The arrogance. The conceit. To think he saw himself as some prize, worth fighting over, after everything that happened. It was laughable, if it wasn't so tragic. Yeah? Well, maybe I don't want to deserve a man who thinks so little of me. Who values his mother's happiness over his wife's. My voice was calm, but inside, I was a whirlwind of emotion. Tom just shrugged, a smug look on his face. Good luck finding someone who'll put up with you like I did. I shook my head, disbelief and anger mingling. Trust me, Tom, the only thing I'll be looking for is peace. Something you and your mother never gave me. Leaving that house, I felt a weight lifting off me. It was the end of one chapter and the start of another. Driving to my parents' house, the emotions were overwhelming. But as soon as I saw the familiar front door, a sense of relief washed over me. This was home. This was where I belonged. My parents were shocked at first, but their support was unwavering. You're back now, and that's all that matters, my dad said, his voice firm and comforting. Mom was more fiery. Let him live with his mother if he loves her so much. You'll find peace now, without their constant badgering. And she was right. I threw myself into my work, my independence blossoming in the absence of Tom's and Carol's criticism. Saving money became easier without the drain of their demands. Slowly, I started to build a life for myself, one where I was in control, where my achievements were celebrated, not belittled. Living with my parents again, I rediscovered what support and love felt like. It wasn't long before I was able to move into my own place, a small but cozy house that was all mine. No Carol to judge me, no Tom to disappoint me. Just me, my work, and the peace I had longed for. Reflecting on everything that happened, I realized Tom was no prize. The real prize was finding myself again, rebuilding my life on my terms. I found strength I never knew I had, and a sense of peace that was priceless. Months had passed since I left Tom and his overbearing mother behind, settling into a rhythm of work, savings, and peace that had long eluded me. My new life was a quiet one, filled with small joys and achievements that were entirely my own. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Carol. Hello? My voice was cautious, the old feelings of tension instantly creeping back. Lara, it's Carol. We need your help. Her voice was shaky, a far cry from the confident, often haughty tone I was used to. I was taken aback. My help? Why would you call me after everything? It's Tom, she said, and I could hear the strain in her voice. He's sick, Lara. Very sick. Lung cancer. The news hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, I felt a pang of concern. I'm sorry to hear that, Carol. But why are you telling me this? Because he needs you, Lara. He needs your support, your forgiveness. We need the money for his treatment. You were always the one who managed to pull things together, she pleaded. I was stunned into silence for a moment. The audacity of her request left me speechless. You want my money? After you practically pushed me out of your lives? Carol's voice hardened. You can hold on to your grudges, Lara, but this is life and death. You were his wife. Doesn't that mean anything to you? The old Carol was back, it seemed. Being his wife didn't seem to mean much when you two were scheming behind my back, I retorted, my initial shock turning into indignation. Lara, please. I wouldn't be calling if there was any other way. Think of the good times, of what you had with Tom. She tried to soften her tone, playing on my emotions. Good times? Carol, you made sure there were as few of those as possible. You and Tom made your bed. Now, you get to lie in it, I said, the years of frustration and hurt fueling my words. There was a pause, and then Carol's voice came through, colder and sharper than before. Fine. If that's how you want to play it. But remember, you're turning your back on Tom in his time of need. Not me. The call ended, and I sat there, phone in hand, a tumult of emotion swirling within me. Anger, guilt, sadness, a cocktail of feelings for a man who had chosen his mother over our life together, and for a woman who saw me as nothing more than a bank. In that moment, I realized the true extent of my freedom. I was no longer bound by their expectations, their demands, or their crises. My life was my own, built on my efforts, my sacrifices. The call, unexpected as it was, served as a stark reminder of the life I had left behind, a life filled with manipulation and emotional blackmail. As I put the phone down, a sense of resolve settled over me. My departure from Tom and Carol's lives was not just a physical one, it was an emotional and financial break too. I had moved on, building something that was entirely mine, free from their shadows. I started diving into investments, reading up every book and article I could get my hands on, and slowly, I began to see the fruits of my labor. My world became numbers and trends, a far cry from the emotional turmoil I left behind. Word got around, as it always does, about Tom's worsening condition and how Carol was barely managing. They'd blown through whatever savings they had, living a life far removed from the comfort they once knew. And Carol, ever the martyr in her own story, made sure everyone knew how I abandoned them in their time of need, painting me as the heartless ex-wife. I heard these rumors from Jenna one afternoon over coffee. She hesitated before telling me, probably expecting me to react. But the truth was, I felt nothing but a distant pity for them. Can you believe it, Lara? Carol's out there telling anyone who'll listen about how you left them high and dry, Jenna said, her voice tinged with disbelief. I shrugged, taking a sip of my coffee. Let her talk, Jenna. Her words don't touch me anymore. I've moved on, and I'm investing in my future, something they never thought to do. Jenna looked at me, a mix of surprise and admiration in her eyes. You're really over it, aren't you? I mean, completely. I nodded, a smile playing on my lips. Completely. My life's taken a turn for the better since I stopped letting them define my worth. I'm making smart investments, learning more every day. Their opinions, their struggles, they're just echoes of a life I left behind. It was liberating, this feeling of complete detachment from the chaos that once consumed me. The rumors, the pitying glances, they meant nothing now. I was building something lasting, investing in myself and my future. The contrast between my growing stability and their dwindling fortunes was stark, but it was the result of choices we each made. As I continued to expand my knowledge and portfolio, the satisfaction of seeing my investments grow was unmatched. I was proving to myself, more than anyone else, that I could thrive on my own terms. The independence and financial security I was building were my true vindication, far removed from the petty squabbles and desperate gossip of Carol's making. One evening, as I reviewed my investment portfolio, the growth and progress reflected in those numbers filled me with a sense of pride. This was real, tangible proof of my resilience and foresight. The rumors, Carol's bitterness, Tom's struggles, they were just background noise to the symphony of my new life. In this quiet moment of reflection, I realized the true extent of my transformation. I had not only survived the storm, but emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. My past with Tom and Carol was a chapter closed, a lesson learned, and my future was a canvas I was eager to fill with the colors of success and peace.
I stepped through the front door, my heart heavy with worries about my son Jake and his family. As I entered the living room, I froze at the sight before me. My husband Doug had our 8-year-old grandson Caleb pinned against the wall, his face contorted with rage. "Where's the money, you little thief?" Doug snarled, shaking Caleb roughly. "I know you stole it from my wallet." Caleb sobbed, his face streaked with tears. "I didn't take anything, Grandpa. I swear." "Doug, what are you doing?" I cried out, rushing over to pull him away from Caleb. "Have you lost your mind? He's just a child." Doug released his grip on Caleb, who ran to me and buried his face against my legs, trembling. I wrapped my arms around him protectively, shocked by my husband's uncharacteristic outburst. "Money's missing from my office," Doug said gruffly, avoiding my accusing stare, "and this little brat was snooping around in there earlier." "That doesn't mean Caleb took anything," I said firmly, stroking our grandson's hair to soothe him. "You know he would never steal from us." Doug's jaw clenched. "Well, the money didn't just disappear on its own. Someone in this house is a thief." My mind reeled as I tried to make sense of the situation. Jake and his wife Amber had always seemed like the perfect couple, doting parents to Caleb. What could have driven one of them to steal from us? Just then, the front door opened and Amber walked in, her pretty face etched with worry. "What's going on?" I heard shouting. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, Doug's furious expression, Caleb clinging to me and crying. I saw a flicker of fear cross her features before she masked it. "Doug, I need to talk to you," Amber said, her voice shaking slightly. "In private. It's important." I tensed, sensing that whatever she had to say would be the key to unraveling this painful mystery. After settling Caleb in the kitchen with a snack, I followed Doug and Amber to the back patio, bracing myself for the truth. Amber took a deep breath, twisting her hands nervously. "I know what happened to the missing money," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "It was me. I took it." Doug exploded. "You lying, thieving." "Let her explain," I cut him off sharply before turning to Amber. "Why would you do this? Steal from your own family?" She broke down, sobs racking her slender frame. "I'm so sorry," Amber choked out. "I never meant for it to go this far, but I'm in trouble, deep trouble." The story came out between gasping breaths and fresh tears. Amber had been hiding a serious gambling addiction, racking up massive debts in secret. Desperate to get money to pay off her bookies before Jake found out, she had resorted to pilfering cash from Doug's office for months. "Please, you can't tell Jake," she begged us. "It will destroy our marriage. I'll get help, I swear. Just give me a chance to make this right." I looked at Doug, seeing my own shock and disappointment mirrored in his eyes. Our once perfect family was crumbling before us, torn apart by Amber's deceit. Could we really keep such a devastating secret from our own son? My heart ached as I realized the impossible choice that lay ahead. No matter what we did next, someone would get hurt, and the scars left behind may never fully heal. The weight of Amber's confession hung heavy in the air as Doug and I sat across from her at the kitchen table. Her once carefully applied makeup was now smeared from crying, her eyes red and puffy. "How could you do this to Jake?" "To Caleb?" I asked, my voice thick with disappointment. "Your gambling addiction has put your entire family at risk." Amber flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I never meant for it to get this bad." "But," she whispered, "at first it was just a little money here and there. But then I started losing more than I could afford." Doug slammed his fist on the table, making us both jump. "And you thought stealing from me was the answer? Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in?" "I'm sorry," Amber sobbed. "I was desperate. The bookies were threatening me, saying they'd come after Jake and Caleb if I didn't pay up." A chill ran down my spine at the thought of my son and grandson in danger because of Amber's reckless behavior. How had she let things spiral so far out of control? "How much do you owe?" I asked, dreading the answer. Amber hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. $50,000, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Doug let out a low whistle. Jesus Christ, Amber, that's more than Jake makes in a year. How the hell are you going to pay that back? I don't know, she said miserably. But I have to try. I can't let Jake find out about this. It would destroy him. I felt a flare of anger at her words. You should have thought of that before you started gambling away your family's future, I snapped. Amber's shoulders shook with fresh sobs. I know, but please, Tina. Doug, you can't tell Jake. I'm begging you. I exchanged a long look with my husband, seeing the conflict in his eyes. As much as we wanted to protect our son from the truth, we both knew that keeping Amber's secret would only make things worse in the long run. We can't lie to Jake, I said firmly. He deserves to know what's going on. Amber's face crumpled. Please, just give me a chance to fix this on my own. I'll do whatever it takes. Get a second job. Sell some of my things. I'll make it right, I swear. Doug shook his head. And what happens when the bookies come knocking on Jake's door demanding their money? Are you going to put your husband and child in danger to cover your own ass? No, of course not, Amber cried. I would never let that happen. But if Jake finds out, he'll leave me. I can't lose my family over this. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, despite my anger and disappointment. Addiction was a terrible disease, one that could make even the most loving person behave in unthinkable ways. You need help, Amber, I said gently. Professional help, and you need to come clean to Jake before things get any worse. She buried her face in her hands, her body shaking with the force of her sobs. I'm so scared, she whispered. What if he can't forgive me? I reached across the table to take her hand, feeling the tremors that ran through her. Jake loves you, I reminded her, but he deserves the truth, and you deserve the chance to get better, for yourself and for your family. Amber took a shuddering breath, then nodded slowly. You're right, she said, her voice small but determined. I'll tell him everything tonight, and I'll get help. I promise. As I watched her walk out the door, shoulders slumped in defeat, I could only hope that it wasn't too late for her, or for the family she had so nearly destroyed with her lies. The sound of the front door slamming jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand, 2:37 a.m. My heart sank as I heard Jake's heavy footsteps coming up the stairs, knowing that Amber must have finally confessed her gambling addiction to him. I pulled on my robe and hurried out into the hallway, nearly colliding with Doug. We exchanged a worried look before Jake appeared at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of anger and betrayal. Did you know? He demanded, his voice shaking. Did you know about Amber's gambling problem? I hesitated, not wanting to lie to my son, but also reluctant to admit the truth. She told us earlier today, I said carefully. We encouraged her to come clean to you. Jake let out a harsh laugh. Well, she certainly did that, right after I found a letter from some bookie threatening to break my kneecaps if she didn't pay up. Doug sucked in a sharp breath. Jesus, Jake, I'm so sorry. We had no idea it had gotten that bad. Bad? Jake echoed incredulously. It's a fucking disaster. My wife has been lying to me for months, stealing money from her own family to feed her addiction. And now we're in debt up to our eyeballs with no way out. I reached out to touch his arm, but he jerked away from me. Jake, please. Amber needs help. She's sick. She's a liar and a thief, he spat. I don't even know who she is anymore. The venom in his voice made me flinch. I had never seen my son so angry, so hurt. It broke my heart to think of the pain Amber had caused him. What are you going to do? Doug asked quietly. Jake ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. I don't know, he admitted. Part of me wants to walk away and never look back, but we have Caleb to think about. At the mention of their son, I felt a surge of protectiveness. You can't let Amber's mistakes tear your family apart, I urged. Caleb needs both of his parents. Does he? Jake asked bitterly. Does he need a mother who lies and steals and puts her own selfish desires above her family's well-being? I opened my mouth to argue, but Doug cut me off with a sharp look. That's not your decision to make, Tina, he said firmly. Jake and Amber need to work this out for themselves. Jake nodded, his jaw clenched tight. I need some time to think, he said. I can't even look at her right now without wanting to scream. Why don't you stay here tonight? I offered. Give yourself some space to clear your head. For a moment I thought he might refuse, but then his shoulders slumped in defeat. Yeah, okay, he agreed. Thanks, Mom. As I watched him disappear into the guest room, I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. I wanted so badly to fix this for him, to take away his pain and anger. But I knew that this was a battle he would have to fight on his own. I turned to Doug, seeing the same worry and frustration etched on his face. "What are we going to do?" I asked softly. He sighed heavily. "We support them," he said, "both of them, and we pray like hell that they find a way through this mess." I nodded, blinking back the tears that threatened to fall. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult for Jake and Amber, but I also knew that as a family, we would face it together, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The tension in the air was palpable as Doug and I sat across from Jake at the kitchen table the next morning. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. I pushed a mug of coffee towards him, but he ignored it, his gaze fixed on some distant point. "Have you heard from Amber?" I asked gently, breaking the heavy silence. Jake shook his head. "No, and I don't want to. Not until I've figured out what I'm going to do." Doug leaned forward, his expression grim. "I know you're hurting, son, but you need to think about Caleb in all this. He needs his mother." "Does he?" Jake asked bitterly. "What kind of mother lies and steals from her own family? What kind of example is that setting for him?" I flinched at the harshness in his voice. "Jake, addiction is a disease. Amber needs help, not condemnation." "She should have thought of that before she started gambling away our future," he snapped. "Before she put our son at risk with her selfish behavior." Doug's face darkened. "I agree. Amber's actions are inexcusable, and if it were up to me, I'd say you should cut her loose and never look back." "Doug," I gasped, shocked by his callousness. "How can you say that? She's your daughter-in-law, the mother of your grandson." He shrugged, unmoved. "She stopped being family the moment she betrayed Jake's trust. As far as I'm concerned, he owes her nothing." Jake looked torn, his eyes darting between us. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "I love Amber, but I don't know if I can ever trust her again. And Caleb, he needs stability, not a mother who could relapse at any moment." "So fight for custody," Doug urged. "Get a good lawyer and make sure Amber never has the chance to hurt Caleb again." I stared at my husband in disbelief. How could he be so cold, so unforgiving? Yes, Amber had made a terrible mistake, but she was still a part of our family, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her completely. "Please, Jake," I begged, "don't make any rash decisions. Amber is getting help. She's trying to make things right." He shook his head, his jaw clenched tight. "I don't know if I can forgive her, Mom. Not after everything she's done." "At least give her a chance to explain," I pleaded. "Hear her out before you do anything drastic." For a long moment, Jake was silent. Then finally he nodded. "Fine, I'll talk to her, but I'm not making any promises." Relief washed over me, even as Doug shot me a disapproving look. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult for all of us, but I couldn't give up on Amber, not when she needed us most. As Jake left to go confront his wife, I turned to Doug, my eyes narrowed. "How could you be so cruel?" I demanded. "Amber is family. We can't just turn our backs on her." "She stopped being family the moment she betrayed us," he said coldly. "And if Jake has any sense, he'll cut her out of his life for good." I shook my head, feeling a surge of anger and disappointment. "I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be so heartless," I said. "Amber needs our support, not our condemnation." Doug's face hardened. "She needs to face the consequences of her actions. And if that means losing her husband and son, then so be it." As he stalked out of the room, I felt a chill run down my spine. I had always known my husband to be a stern man, but never cruel. Now, I couldn't help but wonder if I even recognized the person he had become, or if our family would ever be the same again. The days following Jake and Amber's confrontation were tense and uncomfortable. My son had agreed to give his wife one more chance, but the trust between them had been shattered. I could see the strain on both their faces, the way they avoided each other's eyes and spoke in clipped, formal tones. I tried my best to be supportive, offering to watch Caleb so they could have time to talk things through. But every time I brought up the subject of Amber's addiction, Jake would shut down, his jaw clenching with barely suppressed anger. It was during one of these conversations that I made a shocking discovery. I was tidying up Doug's home office, sorting through the piles of paperwork that had accumulated on his desk, when I stumbled across a series of bank statements. At first glance, they seemed innocuous enough. But as I looked closer, I felt my blood run cold. There, in black and white, were a series of withdrawals from our joint savings account. Thousands of dollars, all funneled into an account I didn't recognize. And the dates. They went back months, long before Amber's gambling addiction had come to light. With shaking hands, I confronted Doug that evening. "What is this?" I demanded, thrusting the statements at him. "Where has all this money been going?" For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then his expression hardened. "That's none of your concern, Tina. I'm handling it." "Handling what?" I pressed. "Doug, this is our money, our future. You can't just take it without telling me." He sighed heavily, running a hand over his face. "Fine. If you must know, I've been giving Amber money to help pay off her debts." I stared at him in disbelief. "What? Why would you do that? We agreed to let Jake and Amber handle this on their own." "Because I don't trust her," Doug said bluntly. "I've been keeping tabs on her, making sure she's not falling back into old habits, and when I saw how much she owed, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." Anger surged through me, hot and bright. "So you went behind my back? Behind Jake's back? Doug, how could you?" "I did what I had to do to protect our family," he snapped. "Amber's addiction has already caused enough damage. I won't let her drag us down with her." I shook my head, feeling sick to my stomach. "This isn't protection, Doug. It's enabling. You're not helping Amber. You're just making it easier for her to keep gambling." "That's not true," he argued. "I've been making her give me receipts, proof that she's using the money to pay off her debts. I'm keeping her accountable." "And what happens when Jake finds out?" I demanded. "What happens when he realizes that his own father has been lying to him, just like Amber has?" Doug's face paled. "He won't find out because you're not going to tell him." I let out a harsh laugh. "You really expect me to keep this a secret from our son? Doug, this is wrong. You know it is." "What's wrong is letting Amber destroy our family," he said coldly. "And if keeping this secret is what it takes to prevent that, then so be it." I stared at him, hardly recognizing the man I had married, the man I had loved for over 40 years. In that moment, I realized that Doug's obsession with controlling Amber had blinded him to the damage he was causing. And I knew that if I didn't put a stop to it, our family might never recover. "No," I said firmly. "I won't be a part of this, not anymore. Amber needs help, not more lies and deceit. And if you can't see that, then I don't know what else to say to you." As I turned and walked away, I felt a heaviness in my heart that I had never known before. I had always believed that Doug and I were a team, that we could face anything together, but now I wasn't so sure. And that uncertainty terrified me more than anything else. The weeks that followed were some of the most difficult of my life. Doug and I barely spoke, the tension between us thick and suffocating. I threw myself into caring for Caleb, trying to provide some sense of normalcy for my grandson in the midst of all the chaos. But even that small comfort was shattered when Jake showed up at our door one evening, his face pale and drawn. "Amber's gone," he said, his voice hollow. "She left a note saying she couldn't take the pressure anymore, that she needed to get away and clear her head." My heart sank as I saw the pain in my son's eyes. "Oh, Jake, I'm so sorry. Do you have any idea where she might have gone?" He shook his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "No, she didn't say, but I think she might have relapsed. I found some new gambling receipts in her purse before she left." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. After everything we had been through, all the lies and betrayal, Amber had thrown away her second chance. And now my son and grandson were left to pick up the pieces. Over the next few days, I did my best to support Jake as he tried to track down his missing wife. He called every casino and racetrack in the area, hoping someone had seen her. But as the days stretched into weeks with no sign of Amber, I could see the hope draining from his eyes. It was during one of these fruitless searches that I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Jake was on the phone with one of Amber's old gambling buddies, his voice tight with anger and frustration. "What do you mean? She's planning to leave the state. Where is she going?" he demanded. There was a pause, then Jake's face turned ashen. "She's taking Caleb with her?" "No way in hell. She can't do that. Not without my permission." My heart seized with fear as I realized the depths of Amber's desperation. She wasn't just running away from her problems anymore. She was trying to kidnap her own son. I knew then that I had to do something. I couldn't let Amber destroy Jake's life any more than she already had, and I certainly couldn't let her take Caleb away from the only stable home he had ever known. So I made a decision that would change all of our lives forever. I called the police and reported Amber's plans, telling them everything I knew about her gambling addiction and the threats she had made against my family. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, betraying my own daughter-in-law like that. But I knew in my heart that it was the right thing to do. Caleb's safety had to come first, no matter what the cost. When the police arrived at Jake and Amber's house later that day, they found her in the midst of packing her bags, a confused and frightened Caleb by her side. She was arrested on the spot, charged with attempted kidnapping and child endangerment. I watched from the sidelines as they led her away in handcuffs, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. Jake stood nearby, his expression unreadable, as he held Caleb close. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice choked with tears. "I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't let her take Caleb away from you." For a long moment, Jake was silent. Then he turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and gratitude. "You did the right thing, Mom. I know it wasn't easy, but you protected Caleb. That's all that matters." As I watched the police car drive away, Amber's face pressed against the window in despair. I felt a sense of grim satisfaction wash over me. She had brought this on herself with her lies and her selfish choices, and now she would face the consequences. But even as I tried to convince myself that justice had been served, I couldn't shake the feeling that our family would never be the same again. That the wounds Amber had inflicted might never fully heal. The days following Amber's arrest were a blur of police interviews, legal meetings, and hushed conversations behind closed doors. Jake was a wreck, torn between his anger at his wife's betrayal and his fear for Caleb's well-being. I did my best to support him, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. It was during one of these tense discussions that I finally learned the full extent of Amber's plans. According to the police, she had been secretly funneling money into a private bank account for months, stockpiling cash for her eventual escape. And she had planned to take Caleb with her, fleeing the state and starting a new life somewhere far away from the consequences of her actions. The thought of losing my grandson forever made my blood run cold. I knew then that I had made the right decision in turning Amber in, no matter how much it hurt to betray her trust. But even as I tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of guilt that plagued me. What if I had been too harsh on Amber? What if I had pushed her to this point with my constant criticism and judgment? These thoughts weighed heavily on my mind as I sat in the courtroom, watching as Amber was led in wearing handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. She looked small and fragile, her once vibrant eyes now dull and lifeless. As the judge read out the charges against her, I saw a flicker of something in Amber's expression. Not remorse or regret, but a cold, calculating anger that made my skin crawl. And then, to my horror, she turned to face Jake and Caleb, her lips curling into a sneer. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just cast me aside and move on with your lives? Well, think again." Jake recoiled as if he had been slapped, his face draining of color. Caleb whimpered and buried his face in his father's shoulder, too young to understand the cruel words being hurled at him. "I'll get out of here eventually," Amber continued, her eyes flashing with malice. "And when I do, I'll come for my son. I'll take him away from you, and you'll never see him again. That's a promise." The courtroom erupted into chaos, with the judge banging his gavel and ordering Amber to be removed from the room. But even as the bailiffs dragged her away, her words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I felt sick to my stomach as I watched Jake try to comfort a sobbing Caleb. How could Amber be so cruel, so selfish? How could she threaten to take away the one thing that mattered most to her own child? In that moment, I knew that I had to do everything in my power to protect my grandson, to make sure that Amber never had the chance to hurt him again. So I made a vow, right then and there. I would fight for Caleb no matter what it took. I would make sure that he grew up in a safe and loving home, surrounded by people who truly cared for him. And as for Amber, Well, she had made her choices. She had chosen her addiction over her family, her own selfish desires over the well-being of her child. And now she would have to live with the consequences. As I left the courtroom that day, my heart heavy with grief and anger, I knew that our family would never be the same again. But I also knew that we would survive this, somehow. We would pick up the pieces and move forward, one day at a time. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would be there for Jake and Caleb. Always. The years that followed Amber's sentencing were a time of healing and rebuilding for our family. Jake threw himself into his work, determined to provide a stable life for Caleb, and I did my best to be there for both of them, offering love and support whenever they needed it. But even as we tried to move forward, the specter of Amber's betrayal hung over us like a dark cloud. Caleb in particular struggled with the loss of his mother. He would often wake up crying in the middle of the night, calling out for her in his sleep. It broke my heart to see my grandson in so much pain, but I knew that we had made the right decision in cutting Amber out of our lives. She had proven time and again that she was not capable of being a good mother or a trustworthy partner. Still, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt whenever I thought about the role I had played in tearing our family apart. If I had been more understanding, more supportive of Amber's struggles, could things have turned out differently? These thoughts plagued me as I watched Jake and Caleb slowly rebuild their lives. Jake started dating again, eventually meeting a kind and loving woman named Sarah, who accepted Caleb as her own. And Caleb, with the help of therapy and a stable home life, began to thrive in school and make new friends. But even as our family healed and grew, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing, that there was a piece of our hearts that would always belong to Amber, no matter how much we tried to forget her. It all came to a head one day when I was cleaning out some old boxes in the attic. I stumbled across a photo album from Jake and Amber's wedding day, their smiling faces beaming up at me from the pages. As I flipped through the pictures, memories of happier times flooding back, I felt a sudden wave of emotion wash over me. Anger, sadness, regret, it all came rushing back in a tidal wave of grief. And then, as if summoned by my thoughts, the phone rang. It was Amber, calling from prison. She had been granted early release for good behavior and wanted to see Caleb. I felt my heart constrict with fear and anger as I listened to her plead her case. How dare she, after everything she had put us through? How could she possibly think that we would let her back into our lives? But as I listened to the desperation in her voice, the genuine remorse and longing, I felt something inside me soften. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for redemption. Maybe Amber had truly changed and was ready to be the mother Caleb deserved. I knew it was a risk. I knew that Jake would be furious with me for even considering it. But in that moment, I made a decision that would change all of our lives once again. I agreed to let Amber see Caleb, under strict supervision and with the understanding that she would have to prove herself worthy of a place in his life. It was a gamble, a leap of faith, but one that I felt compelled to take. As I hung up the phone, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and hope, I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and pain. But I also knew that if there was even a chance of bringing our family back together, of healing the wounds that had torn us apart, I had to try. For Caleb's sake, for Jake's sake, and for the sake of the love that had once bound us all together. And so, with a deep breath and a silent prayer, I prepared myself for the journey ahead. A journey of forgiveness, of second chances, and of the power of a mother's love to overcome even the darkest of betrayals.